Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome to the Meeting of the Minds number 2. You are what you think, better thinking for better living. Before we get started, I'd just like to say a few quick words about our sponsor. Our sponsor is WeWork. So if you see this beautiful space that we're in, this is called WeWork. WeWork is a co-working space. For those of you who don't know, it means if you're starting a business and you need a place to have an office, you can come here and you can rent little or large office spaces, and they're all set up with desks and everything that you need. And I actually had my own, I actually worked here for a few months, and it was great. As you can see, it's a really beautiful space, and there's all kinds of really interesting people that you can meet here. And of course, there's lots of interesting events like this one tonight. So let's give a big round of applause for our sponsor, WeWork, because without them, we wouldn't have a space where we could host this many people and have such a big event. I'm Jeff Brown from Art of Mind, and Art of Mind is where great thinkers are made. We have a dual purpose. Our first purpose is that we teach and practice the intellectual skills of leadership. There are lots of resources if you want to learn about the instrumental skills of leadership, like organization, planning, communication, management. But there aren't a lot of resources to learn about the intellectual skills: vision, decisiveness, critical thinking, fair-mindedness, how to formulate and articulate and communicate your ideas. Being able to construct sound reasoning to say what you think and defend your view is one of the understated skills of leadership, as well as something for your studies, your career, even your personal relationships. And so we have a number of different kinds of events that we do in order to practice these skills. We have the Meeting of the Minds presentation events like this twice a month. We have some new workshops. Pardon me? What did I say? Every 2 months, not twice a month. Yeah, maybe twice a month, if you guys don't mind coming back and speaking every time. What was I saying? Right, workshops that are coming up soon. And every week we have discussion meetings where we talk about important topics of the day. And that's an opportunity to practice saying what you think and defending your position in a fun and friendly atmosphere. The second purpose that we have is to advocate for critical thinking and against misinformation and fake news. And there's a special way that we do this, because when I tell people that this is what I do, their assumption is that there's a certain way you have to spread awareness about critical thinking, which is that you should go in priority order, meaning you find the people that have the worst thinking and you start with them. So people say to me, Jeff, go find the flat earthers and the anti-vaxxers, the 9/11 inside job conspiracy theorists, and fix whatever is wrong with them. So I call this the bottom-up approach. There's a problem with this approach. Do you guys know what it is? The problem is that it doesn't work, because those people don't listen. They're too far gone. And so the way we do it over here is we have a top-down approach, and I call this the rising tide method. You know why I call it that? Because what does a rising tide do? That's right, a rising tide lifts all ships. So I talk to Tristan, and I encourage Tristan to improve his thinking abilities, and Tristan gets better. Could you stand up, please? Right, and then Tristan speaks to the people around him, and then you guys improve your skills. Could you stand up, please? And then so on and so on. So you don't have to. We get the idea. And so that's how a rising tide works. Thanks, guys. And so none of us are perfect thinkers. We could all improve our thinking skills, and there are individual benefits to improving your thinking skills, but there are also larger societal benefits when a significant portion of people improve their skills. You start to put pressure on people who exhibit faulty thinking. You can identify the errors, you become better at pointing them out, better at communicating to other people when there are problems of thinking. If you look at our media, look at our politicians in question period, we have terrible conversations, right? But as the thinking abilities in the population grow, it starts to put pressure on people. Pressure to improve their thinking, be more careful about what they say. and to have better and more productive conversations about important issues. So I know it probably, if you're like me, and you care about truth, you care about objectivity and accuracy and evidence, I know it probably breaks your heart when you see the way some people behave, the kind of things they share on Facebook. But unfortunately, if you want things to change, those people aren't going to change. It's the 80-20 rule, right? If we want to see this change, we have to start with us, lead by example, and improve our own thinking skills. And now, onto our feature presentation. We have 3 presentations, and then afterwards we're going to have a panel discussion. And so let me begin with, you are what you think. And it starts with a story, which is the story of when I went to parachute school in the Army. Now, contrary to popular belief, you don't go to parachute school to learn how to parachute. You go to parachute school because it's the hardest thing that you've ever done in your life up to that point. You go for the added challenge. The stress, the pressure, the abuse, everything is 10 times worse over there than anywhere else. And I went there fully expecting this. But one day, I saw something that was beyond anything that I had ever imagined. It was in our fitness exam to get in right at the beginning, and just all of a sudden, I saw this corporal start yelling at one of the other students. But the things that he was saying were inhumane. These were the most heinous things that I had ever heard one person say to another. And I was watching this from the other side of the room, somebody else getting yelled at that had nothing to do with me, and I wanted to cry. If I was in that person's place, I think I would have just crumbled. But what amazed me is that he just took it. He just said, yes, corporal, no, corporal. And when it was done, he just went on with his day like nothing had happened. And I wondered, how was he able to take that level of abuse and be, by all appearances, unaffected by it? And the only explanation that I could come up with was that he must have imagined some other way of looking at his situation that I didn't see. In other words, objectively, he was getting ruined by this corporal. But subjectively, inside his mind, he must have made a choice about what this meant to him. And he must have decided that it didn't mean anything. And he was right, because that corporal was just a massive jerk, and nothing that he was saying had anything to do with what he needed to focus on. What was he doing? Why was he there? And who was he? And so I was amazed, because he must have had some extraordinary clarity and priority of thought. So, you are what you think means that the value and the quality of your immediate experience is directly related to how you think about it. You have this reality outside of you, things that are happening, and you can't really change that. But at the same time, you have this internal, subjective process of making sense and making meaning out of the events of your life. It's through our perception that we color these events. Imagine the struggles that you go through in life. You lose your job, you don't get the job that you want, you have a romantic breakup, you fail in school, you go to the restaurant, the pizza you want is not on the menu. Maybe you're like me, you babysat your nephews over the weekend and they thought it would be a fun idea to flush their toys down the toilet and spill brown water all over my floor. You can't always choose what happens to you in life, but you can always choose what it means. That toilet was old, it was like from the 80s. I've been wanting to change it for a long time. Now's my opportunity. There's somebody who I think had a really good perspective on this. Who is this? Carl Sagan, yeah. Carl Sagan wrote a book called The Demon Haunted World. And in The Demon Haunted World, he advanced his own introductory critical thinking cheat sheet, which was called the Baloney Detection Kit. And in it, one of the items in that kit is called Imagine Other Possibilities, or Imagine Other Explanations, or Other Hypotheses. What Carl Sagan is trying to warn us about here is that there's a danger to our psychology. There's a trap, which is that we have a tendency to jump to conclusions, don't we? We not only jump to conclusions, but we jump and we commit. So the moment that this idea falls into your mind, it's as if it starts to germinate, grow roots, and cement itself in place. It starts to take on this feeling of prominence and certainty. And beliefs it's like they have inertia. Once this belief is in your mind, it's hard to get it out and replace it with something else. So Sagan knew that the foundation of powerful thinking is imagination. And that in order to unlock this power, you need to be able to see through your own first impressions, your own intuitions, and imagine that the world might be other than how you first see it. In other words, he's saying, we naturally do this. Here's my idea, I love it, I'm going to hold on to it forever. But what we should do instead is this. Here's my idea, now I'm going to challenge myself to see how many other ideas I can come up with to compete with this one. How many other options, possibilities, explanations, hypotheses can I come up with? And then I'm going to choose which is the most productive one for me. Imagining other possibilities is a fundamental thinking skill that can help you in artistic pursuits, creative pursuits. It can help you in your studies, your career, in scientific innovation, research and development in industry, and even in your personal life. It's the power of creativity, or in critical thinking terms, it's the measure of breadth. Breadth is one of the criteria that you want to look at when you self-evaluate your thinking ability. How broad thinking are you? How wide of a spotlight does your mind cast and illuminate the questions that you examine? At the last meeting of the minds, I said that the word critical means what? Anybody remember? The word critical means something that is pivotal, something that has the power and the depth to affect change. And so by that definition, critical thinking means thinking that has the power to change your mind. And so therefore, creativity is a core part of critical thinking, because before you can change your mind, you have to first be able to imagine what you're going to change it to. And what are the reasons for why you should change it? You need to be able to take your mind to a place where you can look at the world and you can imagine that it might not quite be the way that you first thought it was. And furthermore, being able to manage your perception and manage your emotions is an important part of your intellectual development, because your feelings, your emotions, are actually what sets the ceiling on your intellectual ability. And the reason is explained by Linda Elder and Richard Paul in this, which is their thinker's progression model. In other words, these are the 3 steps that you go through as you progress in improving your thinking ability. Solmaz will tell you that there's about 15 steps, and she's right, but this is the basic version. So at level 1, you have the unreflective thinker. Level 2, the self-oriented critical thinker. And level 3, the self-transcending critical thinker. And so at level 1, unreflective thinker, we're talking about a person who does not engage in metacognition. Someone who does not think about how they think. They don't question their own beliefs. They don't question their own thinking process. To get up to level 2, you need technical skills. So this is where you can identify logical fallacies, you can spot cognitive biases, you have some scientific literacy, you understand logic and evidence and burden of proof. You understand all of the processes and the how of thinking, but you're still missing something. And what you're missing to get up to level 3 is what we call the emotional and dispositional elements of critical thinking. This means things like, can you take your ego out of your thinking? Can you admit to yourself and admit to others when you're wrong? Do you value intellectual humility? Do you take care to separate your self-image from your beliefs? And do you make the effort to correct for your own cognitive biases and motivated reasoning? And the surprising thing, and the unfortunate thing, is that level 2 can sometimes be worse than level 1. That's strange, right? Normally, when you progress, you get better, right? But in this case, it's not always true. Because at level 2, you become a skilled rationalizer. You become skilled at making up the reasons for why you believe whatever you believe and for rejecting other viewpoints, regardless of whether you're correct or not. In other words, you get good at having reasons to not listen to others and to just stick to your own beliefs. So how you manage your emotions, how you extract meaning from the things that happen to you in life is an important part of your intellectual development, and it's how you get from level 2 up to the top. And once again, and it's also how you get the clarity to see through your own illusions. And once again, Linda Elder and Richard Paul have a great explanation for how you do that. According to their model of critical thinking, the mind has 3 principal functions, which are thinking, feeling, and wanting. And these 3 areas are interrelated. So your activity in one of them bleeds into and affects your activity in the other 2. But one of these things is not like the others. Which of these can you control directly? Wanting? I hear, okay, people voting for wanting and thinking. I'm going to go with thinking. That's what Linda Elder and Richard Paul say. Thinking is the part that you can control directly. If you want something, you just keep wanting it until you find some way to address that craving. If you feel your emotions, your feelings, they just kind of wax and wane according to their own natural cycles. But your thinking is something that you can actually control. You can examine your own thinking and question it, and you can also change the direction of your thinking. If you find that your thoughts are unproductive, you can think about something else. And so they call this strategic thinking. And the process of learning strategic thinking is the process of learning to wrestle control from your irrational mind over to your rational mind in order to make better decisions that are going to help you in your life. And this is the process. Step 1, you want to identify your irrational thoughts. And the warning that you have an irrational thought is that it's triggering some kind of negative emotion. So whenever you notice that you're feeling angry, you're feeling anxious, that's a clue to examine how you're thinking and how that might be affecting your feelings. Point 2, consider the alternatives. What are some other ways of looking at your situation? What are some other interpretations, some other options that might be open to you? 3, choose your best option. And finally, once this difficult period is over and you have some mental clarity, go back and evaluate what you did. When you have a clear mind, ask yourself, did you make the best decision? Could you have done it differently? Could you have made a better decision? And the hard part here is, again, number 2. That's the one that Carl Sagan warned us about, right? He warned us that, sorry guys. He warned us that you have to have the courage to admit certain possibilities to yourself. That you might have to admit that you've made mistakes in the past. You might admit that you've done some things that you regret. And you might have to do the hard thing of letting go of your emotions. You might have to abandon your anger, abandon your sadness, and abandon your regrets, because intellectually you realize that that's the better option for you. And so finally, I want to leave you with one story to bring the message home. And it comes from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl was a neurologist and a psychiatrist, and he was somebody who learned a lot about purpose and meaning and overcoming adversity as a Holocaust survivor. And this story comes actually from after the Holocaust, when a man came to him who was in a severe depression over the death of his wife. His wife had died 2 years earlier, and he just could not get over how much he missed his wife and how much despair this caused him. And so Frankl met the man, and he asked him, what would have happened if you had died and your wife had survived you? And the man said, that would have been terrible. She would have suffered just as I suffered now. And so Frankl said to him, so you see, she's been spared that suffering, and the price is that you now survive to mourn her. And the man thanked Frankl, and he didn't stop missing his wife, but he found meaning for his suffering, and he traded his despair for reason. So how you think doesn't change your circumstances. It doesn't make the pain of difficult circumstances go away, but it can give you a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose, and it can tell you how to better react to your situation and where to go from there. So for your own fulfillment and success, remember that you are what you think.